American. It's either you're one or the other. I know, I'm from London. Stop for me. You're not English. Well, even if you're from Dominican Republic, somebody brought you there. As long as you got black in your skin, say it loud. Say it proud. You are Africans. We are Africans. Louder. We are Africans. Louder. We are Africans. Come on, Africans. Yeah. We are Africans. I can hear you. We are Africans. Louder. We are Africans. Come on, Africans. This one's for anyone with a lot of melanin. Black people got the animal adrenaline, and we move with the speed of a javelin. We're the ones that get the people bubbling. The heartbeats like an African drum. We got rhythm from when we're born. It's not where you are, it's about where you're from. Stop acting dumb, when you gonna learn? If you look back in history, you will find many just like me. Sold for money through slavery, taken to a place in the Caribbean seas. The game is to conquer, divide and rule, and make us feel black and beautiful. We read the books, we know the truth. Anybody black comes from the same roots. We are Africans. Louder. We are Africans. Louder. We are Africans. Come on, Africans. Yeah. We are Africans. I can hear you. We are Africans. Louder. We are Africans. Come on, Africans.
Yeah, I was born in the United States. Proud to be black with my African face. Mixed race, I got African traits. You can see I'm African when I step up in the place. It's like we're all on the same side. It's like we're all from the same tribe. Obama winning had us feeling with the same pride.
Africans.
I was born in Jamaica with African roots. From the same tree, African fruits. All around the world, my African youths. Come back, we round up the African troops. All is one, doesn't really matter where we all are from. I've got a dream, you can call it dumb, but I wanna hear you singing this with all your lungs like
we are Africans. Louder. We are Africans. Louder. We are Africans. Come on, Africans. Yeah. We are Africans. I can hear you. We are Africans. Louder. We are Africans. Come on, Africans. Oh, you haven't heard the news, so here's a couple of clues. The blacker the berry, the sweeter the juice. Black skin is hard to refuse. Once you go black, you can never go back. Everyone out there just feels black. They can't compare to the things that we pack. Yeah, we're the king of the sack. Plus, if you mix milk with some cocoa puffs, you get caramel with Afro puffs. So be proud of what you got, 'cause everybody wanna be us. That's why they chill in the sunbed. If you go in the sun, they go turn red. But we are made for the sun from the day we were born. We get blacker, but we don't get buds, 'cause we are Africans. Louder. We are Africans. Louder. We are Africans. Come on, Africans. Yeah. We are Africans. I can hear you. We are Africans. Louder. We are Africans. Come on, Africans. No matter the nationality or what your passport says, if you're black, you are African. Show more from America to Jamaica, every single diaspora. Scream out loud. Yeah. I'm not forgetting all my other Africans. Mixed race, white, we are one. Africans. Yeah. Together we stand, divided we fall, and we're standing tall. All my people, Africans.
Greetings. Hello. Happy day to you. Hope you are reaching your highest level of mental, physical, and spiritual strength, and that everybody is doing well. Welcome to this week's episode of Our Ancestors' Voices, a weekly program sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And we're so excited to have the topic that we have today, the criminal distortion of Malcolm X. And if you are not aware, this past Friday, 2 days ago, was the 60th, 6-0, commemoration of the assassination of El Hajj Malik El Shabazz, better known as Malcolm X. And so we're going to talk today about how his image has been how there's been a skillfully designed effort to distort who he was and the work that he did. And I'm so glad that you're here to join us today. I'll be flying solo today. Shakura is preparing to defend her doctorate dissertation. She will be doing that in approximately 3 weeks. So she is busy with finalizing her dissertation so that she can argue and defend it and be done. And we have all the support in the world, of course, for her completing that, provided, as I know she will, she uses it to advance the struggle for the masses of our people. So we're very excited about that, and we look forward to her coming back in a very short time. But we want to give honor and thanks to the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. Had the honor and privilege of speaking at a pro-immigration rally here yesterday. There was an outstanding turnout, thousands of people, and also helping organize the security for that turnout as solid work of solidarity, right? And those of you that the outpouring of love that we got, myself and the other AAPRP members who participated. This is a great time for us to understand how important it is for us to respect each other's struggles, right? So very positive experience. I was exhausted at the end of it. My days are coming to a close of doing security for 4 or 5 mile marches. It's just not what it used to be, and that's to be expected. But one of the things that I look forward to doing is training, like the young comrades I had yesterday, training them for how they can do it. That's really how I see my role primarily going forward. So just a very honorable day overall, and just giving respect to our African ancestors. They are the reason that we're here. They are the reason that we do what we do, and they certainly are the inspiration that keeps us focused. Sorry, I hit the mute button for some reason. Just want to give our basic introduction as we always do, and just let you know who we are. Our Ancestors' Voices is sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party, AAPRP. And the AAPRP is, of course, a revolutionary, independent, mass, Pan-African political party with its base in Africa. And our objective is Pan-Africanism, which we define as one unified socialist Africa. We believe that Pan-Africanism is the solution to the problems Africans face, scattered and suffering in 120 countries, 2.5 billion of us worldwide. And our work to achieve Pan-Africanism, we outline in Kwame Nkrumah's Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare that he authored in 1968. And in this book, if you want to understand what Pan-Africanism is, I strongly suggest this book for you. He lays out the strategy. The strategy is to unite all of the revolutionary Pan-African formations on the ground throughout Africa into one political formation. And that, my friends and enemies, is the work of the All African People's Revolutionary Party to do that. And I, of course, have been fortunate enough to participate in a lot of that on-the-ground work throughout Africa. So I know that it's happening. We know that the progress is being made. And so we just continue to build upon that work. And Our Ancestors' Voices is hosted each week, usually by Shakura and myself. But as I just mentioned, Shakura is completing her dissertation so that she can be prepared to defend it in a few weeks. If you don't know that process, when you write a PhD dissertation, you have to defend the material that you produced, and you have a board of people who you have to defend, and they raise questions and present doubts and question why it is. And her dissertation is on disparities in healthcare with African women worldwide. So as I'm sure you can imagine, she's going to have a ton of questions, a ton of people who don't want to see that come out, especially in this current environment. So she's spending the next couple of weeks getting prepared to defend her dissertation. And so I'll be doing this program at least until mid-March by myself, and look forward to her return. But we'll go ahead and get started, and we'll talk about distortion, misinformation, and these things really, you all, being the capitalist way. And just in case you missed it, when we use the word capitalism, we're not using some nebulous, arbitrary definition. We're very clearly talking about the dominant economic system on the planet Earth today, which is defined by organizing all of the world's means of production, the materials that provide the resources for us to live in the life that we live, and those material resources being owned and controlled by private corporate interests for profit. So capitalism is defined by the means of production being owned for private profit. So we're talking about the distortion and misinformation that this capitalist system institutionalized on a daily basis, 24/7, 365 days a year. And the way we start with that is, objectively speaking, we say that everything capitalism does is distorted and is lied about. Every single thing that it does. And there are some examples there. Capitalism equals freedom and democracy. That's what they always say, right? But that's a damn lie. I mean, there's no question that it's a lie. In fact, when you look at history, especially as African people, when we look at the world through an African lens, and I don't know what other lens we would look at it through, but when we look at the world through an African lens, then we as a people had the vote in Africa before we had it, those of us living in this country. So it's insane for an African running around this country talking about this is the freest country in the world, and you've only had the right to vote for 50 years. 60 years at the most, since 1965, if you want to, really be technical about it. But that's not even really true, because you had their constitution in 17, I believe it was 1780, whenever it was, that 15th Amendment was ratified, and that supposedly gave African men the vote. And clearly it didn't do that. So they had to come back 100 years later in 1965 and pass the Voting Rights Act. And still you have so much consistent efforts to derail and prevent African people from voting in this backward system. So there's no freedom in democracy. And I would argue this question of democracy in this society, you can only say what you want to say as long as nobody's listening. As long as nobody's really listening to you other than, 100 people, 50 people, a few hundred people a week watch this program. As long as that's the case, then you can say whatever the hell you want to say. But history is clear. The minute you have a mass audience, you cannot say whatever you want to say. And we're talking about Malcolm X. You could just ask him. He's a clear example of how you cannot say what you want to say when people are listening. So that's not true, and it never has been true. And then the other point about democracy is a core component of democracy, everyone, is the masses of people having information. Because without information, you're not equipped to make the proper decisions. You can't make proper decisions based on ignorance. And the overwhelming majority of people in this country and in all capitalist countries in Europe, Canada, Australia, the Zionist state of Israel, etc., and so forth, all of these countries, people don't have information, especially in this backward cesspool. People don't know anything in this backward cesspool. They can't explain anything. Basic history, U.S. history, people don't know it. You see it, these talk shows, Go on the street and ask people basic questions like who's the vice president? They don't know. They can't answer any of that. So how are you going to have a democracy when people don't have basic information and don't have just a fundamental grasp on, just 1, 2, 3 type things? Like, you can't do it. And then you start talking about, well, is this country a criminal nation by defending its borders? How are you going to make that assessment? Is Iraq a terror? Were they a terrorist country? Afghanistan? How do you don't even know how to point out those places? 99% of these people in this country can't point out those countries on a map. So how are they qualified to make an assessment about this? There's no freedom in democracy here. Sorry if you believe that, you're just confused. And that colonizers did the colonized a favor by subjugating them. This is the kind of logic that feeds into backward statements like go back to Africa or go back where you came from. Because the thinking behind that is that somehow white people are doing you a favor by the fact that you're in this country today or in these societies today, which is, that's laughable, right? Because, they have all these videos out here where they show all these Africans in Europe, in Germany, in Belgium, in France, in Britain. And they're talking about, why are they here? They should be. Well, the reason why, and even you can talk about the indigenous people, Mexican people, Chicano people being here and the climate in this country. Why are they here? What are they doing here? This is their country. This is their land. You stole it from them. They didn't come here. They were already here. I live in California. California was a part of Mexico. Look at an old map and understand what I'm talking about right now. And they stole this from those people. So a lot of these people here have been here thousands of years. Your white ass just got here last week. So this is the reality. And it's even worse when our people parrot that confusion, right? And Africans in Europe, the only reason why, how the hell are white people in France going to complain about Africans being in France when Africa's wealth has been created by colonizing Africa? And so because of that, even though colonization ended 60 years ago, they accumulated all that wealth for hundreds of years until 60 years ago, all the countries in Africa gained their independence from France, but then they still have maintained this illegal system of ownership of French resources. All you got to do is understand the issue of the CFA franc, the currency in about 10 countries in Africa, and how France controls the ability of these countries to have viable currency on the world market by forcing them to place 50% of their annual revenues earned into a French operating account. This is colonization 2025. So that the countries have no resources to build up their own infrastructure. So, of course, if someone wants a job or if they want to go to college and university, they have to leave Guinea. They have to leave Burkina Faso or Niger or Mali or the Cameroons, all these countries that Senegal colonized by France, and they go to France or go to the US or go to Canada. That's what they do because the resources have been stolen from Africa. So that's a damn lie that the colonizers have done us some kind of favor and that our history is inferior to European history. And a lot of us believe that. And the only reason why we do is because we are intellectually lazy and we have not taken the time to study our own history. Because we will tell you confidently and irrefutably that any African on earth today who knows their African history is a proud African. Nobody that knows African history, that's taken the time and the resources to study it seriously, not a single one of those persons is running around here today talking about, well, I don't want that history. I'm an American. I was in the Americas for thousands of years. No proud African would talk like that. The only people that talk like that, and I talk to them all the time, and I always ask them, so tell me what books you've read on African history. And they can't, they don't have, they didn't never, it's always subterfuge. Well, I've done it. Tell me what books you've read about Africa. And after 3 or 4 minutes of this ridiculous back and forth, it's clear you have never read anything about Africa. So if you haven't read anything about Africa on your own, then the only information you have is what random people who know less than you, which is almost nothing or virtually nothing, or what the capitalist system has told you. Either way, it's bad. Either way, it's worthless. So this is the reason why you have this level of confusion that exists. Whereas the Africans who have studied our history, and I'm talking about people who have read through volumes of books, right, and studied them, like W.E.B. Du Bois's The World in Africa, like Walter Rodney's How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, right? Like even books like Chancellor Williams' Destruction of Black Civilization, even all of those types of that book, The Destruction of Black Civilizations, that's not a book that I would agree with, but I've read it multiple times. So even though it's a book that's really doesn't really have a firm class analysis, that's my problem with it. You know, if you don't have a class analysis, then you'll look at the kings and queens in African history and you'll see that as a positive thing because you don't have a class analysis. You don't understand that just because we're all black, we don't have the same interests. You don't understand that. So this is still, it's better to read that than to not read anything at all, because at least it gives you the history of our people. Even if it's from a distorted perspective, that's still better than not having any history, because whatever you have is going to be distorted. So at least you have at least you'll know how to spell Kemet. You'll know that we created chemistry. You'll know that we created, the way to tell time and all of this stuff. So that's good. That's good. So it's better than nothing. So all of these books, like, and we had, Ali Missouri and all of these historic Yosef Ben Yakinen, Dr. Ben, John Henrik Clark, these people, Cheikh Anta Diop from Senegal, they've written all these books on African history. And so you should study them. Because if you don't know those people and you don't know those books, you don't know anything about Africa. So keep your mouth shut about my mother. We don't want to hear your subjective, ignorant opinions about my mother. Just like you don't want me talking about your mother, I don't want you talking about my mother in an ignorant way. So study, understand African history. Then we can have conversations. But the point right now is that everything capitalism has taught us is a damn lie. Nothing it's taught us is the truth. Listen to think about it. Christopher Columbus discovered America. Lie. America's the greatest country on earth. Lie. The only things that this country is great about are things that I wouldn't brag about if I had any sense. This is a great country when it comes to incarcerating people, especially people who shouldn't be incarcerated. People who have mental illness issues, people that have issues related to poverty, systemic poverty conditions, all of these things. This country is great at incarcerating people. Period. There's no country on earth better than this country at doing that. It's great at disparity in healthcare. This is what Shakur is working on in her dissertation. It's great about that. It's unprecedented in its disparities of healthcare based on your financial resources. If you have a plentiful supply of financial resources, you can get quality healthcare. If you don't, you won't. It's just that simple. This country's great at denying you health care if you don't have a lot of money. It's better than any country in the world at doing that. It's great in that way. It's great in mass shootings. No country has more mass shootings than this country. So when they say America's great, if they're talking about that, yeah, you're great at mass shootings. No question about that. You number one, number one. Nobody can compete with you on that. But when it comes to humanism, and advancing human society and people, this is the worst society in human civilization, and the other capitalist countries are right around with it, and that's an irrefutable fact. And the reason why there's a distortion requirement, and we just start with this picture of Leopold from Belgium. They call him King Leopold. And here, someone has properly outfitted him with blood. That's a proper act that whoever carried out. And what this reflects is Leopold was this thug who ruled over Belgium, who saw the value of Congolese natural resources, and labor. And so this criminal invaded the Congo and gained control of the territory and carried out a brutal reign of terror against the people in the Congo for decades, where millions of people were killed. Like all of you know about the Holocaust during World War II in Europe, and you should know about that. 6 million people killed. Some say more than that. You should know about that. And that's a terrible, terrible, terrible tragedy in human history. But you got to ask your question, why do you not know to the same degree the genocide in the Congo from Leopold, from Belgium, where a minimum of 20 million people were killed between 1910 and 1925? This happened. How come you don't know about that? You don't know about the 20 million people whose appendages were amputated because they were caught outside without their identification in the Congo under Leopold's rule. This is what we're talking about the distortion requirement, because history from Belgium and from the US and from all these capitalist countries, they swear to you that Leopold was a great leader that contributed much to the development of the Congo. He contributed to the terrorizing of our people in the Congo and the theft of resources. At that time, it was the ivory from the elephants. He stole all the ivory out of the Congo, killed all the elephants. He certainly did that. But other than that, it's a distortion to represent this criminal thug as some sort of contributor to Africa. So if a criminal's entire capacity was built specifically by their theft of your land and resources, that thief will never acknowledge that. That thief will never say, I stole from you. Belgium will never admit that its wealth is based upon the exploitation of the Congo. They'll never admit that. France will never admit that its wealth today is based on its exploitation of Niger and Mali and Senegal and Burkina Faso and Cameroon and Cote d'Ivoire. They'll never admit that. But even today, as we're talking right now, 1 in 3 houses in France are lit up by Niger uranium. In Niger, people don't even have consistent electricity. But France will never admit that to you. The thugs in Britain will never admit that the wealth of Britain was financed by exploiting Africa. Nigeria, Kenya, Ghana, all of the former French colonies in Africa. Most of the cocoa in the world still today comes from Ghana. That's exploitation that they've benefited from. And the U.S. will never admit it. I mean, I don't know why some of you all still trying to get them to acknowledge what happened in slavery. They're not ever going to do that. Kwame Ture told us this 50 years ago. He told us that morality is a great weapon when your enemy has a conscience, but the problem is America has none. I mean, I don't know what it's going to take for us to realize that. Stop trying to get these people to acknowledge your humanity. They're never going to do it. And you're a sick puppy that you are trying so hard to get anybody to acknowledge your humanity. All you have to do is say to yourself, I'm a human being worthy of respect, and go from there. And whoever doesn't respect that, to hell with them. We walk right over their chest. That's what we have to learn how to do, family. We have to learn how to understand that, because this is a critical thing for us to be able to advance in our existence. So this is, I would argue, a critical element of who Malcolm X was. And also, it'll help you understand who he wasn't, right? So what was Malcolm X not? What was not characteristic of them? Well, a common perception today is that Malcolm X was the complete creation of Elijah Muhammad, the longtime leader of the Nation of Islam for 44 years, right? And that Elijah Muhammad rose up Malcolm X from a criminal, and without that, Malcolm X would have never been anything. And a lot of us believe that because that's what's depicted in Spike Lee's movie, Malcolm X. That's how that movie represents Malcolm's development. And most of us don't study Malcolm. So all we know is that movie, which was a really poor movie as it relates to understanding who Malcolm is. I mean, extremely poor. in terms of understanding who Malcolm was. I'm sorry, I'm nothing against Spike Lee, but I'm just saying the movie was not. It was not a good. If you want to understand who Malcolm X is, you're not going to do that just by relying on that movie. That's not going to do that for you. But it just was not a realistic. That's not a realistic perspective to give Elijah Muhammad all of that credit. And I know, like the Nation of Islam, they always want to say that, because that serves their interests. Well, Malcolm X was a product of us. He wouldn't have been, you got to credit the teacher. And I get that. I understand that. Certainly, Elijah Muhammad played a role in helping Malcolm X develop. But it would be undialectical, it would be ahistorical to give Elijah Muhammad all of the credit when we know that both of Malcolm's parents, Earl and Louise Little was born in the Caribbean in the country Grenada. They were both active members of the Universal Negro Improvement Association, the organization started by Marcus Mosiah Garvey and Amy Ashwood Garvey, and then later facilitated by his second wife, Amy Jock Garvey. But the point is, the Littles were active participants in the UNIA, which was one of the first Pan-African organizations that advocated that we are African people and we have to gain our freedom and forward self-determination by building our own institutions that permit us to do that. So this young man, Malcolm Little, grew up under that kind of tutelage in his family. And it was Louise Little, after Earl Little was killed, it was Louise Little who demonstrated what I would argue was one of the most impressive displays of dignity that you could ever see by attempting to maintain, y'all don't know, we got to study our history. You don't know what happened to this woman. And Spike Lee's movie didn't spend 5 seconds talking about Louise Little. But Louise Little, they cheated her out of the life insurance that her husband paid for her. He had a late payment at the time he was killed, but he had made the payment before he was killed. And by the laws of how insurance is administered, that should have qualified her to have access to the policy. But insurance is a gangster industry. It's an extortion racket. Most of what they try to do is figure out how to avoid paying claims. So certainly, if you think about it, in the 1930s, this racist environment in this country, they could easily figure out a corrupt way to deny paying a claim to Pan-Africanist Africans in the state of Nebraska. So they had very little difficulty doing that. And all of the medical care, all of the things that Louise Little needed to take care of her family, denied. All of the aid, denied that she qualified for. And so they talk about she went to the insane asylum, but they don't explain to you why. And that's why you have to study it, because I know what happened to Louise Little. That's why nobody could tell me anything about her being unstable and having mental health. They drove her insane. The system, this capitalist system, drove her insane. And they did that because her and her husband had the audacity to stand up for our people. That's why that happened. And Malcolm X grew up in that environment. You don't think he was influenced by that dignity that his parents displayed? There's no question that he was influenced. And that's why it's not shocking that after he left the Nation of Islam, and he did many things to sabotage his relationship in the Nation of Islam while he was in there. And if you study his history, you'll know that. He did many things. Like, for example, and we'll talk about it because they're part of this program, but I'll just say that one of the things that he was doing was, towards the end of his life, he went immediately to Pan-Africanism after he left the Nation of Islam. Immediately. The last 11 months of his life were spent doing Pan-African work. He spent all the time in Africa building organization. His organization that he started in July of 1964 was the Organization of Afro-American Unity, the OAAU. This was patterned after Kwame Nkrumah's Organization of African Unity that was started a year before that in Africa. And what Malcolm, his vision was that the OAAU would be the U.S. representative to the OAU. He saw himself as an African in America. He said that. When cats have kittens in the oven, you don't call them biscuits. He said that. That's a direct quote from Malcolm X in his Ballad of the Bullet speech. So what he's saying is that we're Africans who were kidnapped and brought to America. How can we be Black Americans or African Americans? That doesn't make much sense. But our enemies have been telling us, oh, you're American, you're American, you're American, you're American. You don't need to know about Africa. We don't study Africa. We don't know anything about it other than what some random clown from Nigeria told us. We don't know anything about it. Oh, you're not American, you're not African, you're American, you're American, you're American. This is the greatest country in the world. You don't need to be anything else but this. Even though we don't give you anything, we treat you like trash. We disrespect you every day. You don't know anything else, so this is what you are. And so that's the reason why we're in this situation we're in right now. But Malcolm knew better. And if we want to understand that, we got to study Malcolm's life. He developed into a revolutionary Pan-Africanist. And he did that beyond calling white people devils, which is what they were doing at that time in the Nation of Islam, the organization he belonged to. I would argue that if he was still calling white people devils and operating on that kind of platform, he would still be alive today. The reason why he's not is because he evolved into a revolutionary. The Nation of Islam was not trying to overthrow the U.S. government. That's not their program. I'm not throwing shade at them. I'm just saying that's never been their program. And it never was intended by the leadership to be their program. But he grew beyond that. And he recognized that we are African people and our future is tied to the direction of Africa. And he said that whatever way we go here in the U.S. is going to be connected to Africa. We are the only people who think that we're going to make progress by disconnecting ourselves from our culture and our history. No other people do that. We're the only people that do that. We think that only thing we need is to connect ourselves to the system that oppresses us. And then we wonder why we never move forward. I mean, that's a bad strategy. That is a terrible strategy, but yet we continue to do it. And we don't make any, it's the definition of insanity, continuing to do the same thing and expecting a different result. Malcolm represented the best of revolutionary intelligentsia. That means people who study ideas, you all, that's it, and use those ideas to advance the masses of the people. And he was great at taking complex topics and breaking them down. I'll give you an example. His classic analysis of the house slave, field slave. That still applies today. It's an outstanding class analysis that we have some people who reap the benefits of the system, so they identify with the master. And then we have others who don't, and they don't identify with the master. His analysis of that is outstanding, and it's irrefutable. His analysis of the Democratic and the Republican Party that he gave in the Ballad of the Bullet speech and talked about both of them being dogs, both of them being canines. And he talked about how the fox hunts you in a very sophisticated way. The strategy of the fox is to make you relax, make you think you're not in danger. And when you drop your guard, that's when the fox attacks. Whereas he says the wolf comes snarling, lets you know right away that he doesn't like you and he's going to try to kill you and eat you. And he says the Democratic Party is the fox and the Republican Party is the wolf. But they're both canines at the end of the day. They'll both eat us up. And we still don't understand that. We have not gotten that message that Malcolm clearly gave us. We still think that we can empower ourselves in the Democratic Party without having an organized base of our own within the Democratic Party. We should have learned that from the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, who was heavily influenced by Malcolm X. They gave us the model. They organized the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party with Ms. Fannie Lou Hamer. That's how you got the vote and all of that. But we still didn't get any power. We got the vote, but no power. And so the next year they organized the Lowndes County Freedom Organization, the first Black Panther Party, the African political party. And that's the reason why they did that. It's because they were trying to develop a model where we could be empowered. And we just skipped over all of that in 2025. And we're back to begging these European billionaires in the Democratic Party to accept us. And again, we wonder why we're not making any progress. So defaming Malcolm X. Here we have the picture of Malcolm X with Kwame Nkrumah. I mentioned that before, the relationship that the two of them had, very close relationship. This is in Harlem in 1960 at African Liberation Day. Kwame Nkrumah mentored so many leaders in the African struggle for freedom in the U.S. Even if you don't know him, you have been impacted by his work. He was a mentor of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. King went to Ghana's independence commemoration in 1957, and they formed that relationship there. He was a mentor to Malcolm X. He was clearly a mentor to Kwame Ture, who was Stokely Carmichael. He moved to Guinea to be Kwame Nkrumah's political secretary. So he was a mentor to Shirley Graham Du Bois, the widow of W.B. Du Bois, who founded the NAACP, who denounced his U.S. citizenship and moved and died in Ghana. And I've been to the gravesite of W.B. Du Bois and Shirley Graham Du Bois many times. Every time I go to Ghana, I pay tribute to both of them there. But we don't know anything about any of this. So this is why it's important that we talk about defaming Malcolm. When capitalism makes you think Malcolm's legacy as a civil rights activist is about a stamp or a movie, then you really miss his critical contribution. And that type of contribution, the most important contribution Malcolm made to us, was expressed by Ahmed Sekou Touré, who was one of our revolutionary Pan-Africanist ideologues from Guinea, West Africa, when he hosted Malcolm in Guinea in 1964. And while they were eating dinner, Malcolm wrote about it in his diary. And that his daughter, Ayatollah Shabazz, published his diary, so you should read it. But in the diary, Malcolm talked about how Sekou Touré kept telling him, our people need dignity. More than anything else, we need dignity. We need to understand how to stand up and be proud of who we are and refuse to let anybody disrespect us. And Sekou Touré told Malcolm, the moment we have that, the rest of these problems will wilt like a flower in the hot sun. That's what he told him. And that's 100% correct. I would argue the biggest problem we have today is not that we don't have enough doctors, not that we don't have enough lawyers, not that we don't have enough entertainers that support us as a people. Our problem is that we don't have dignity. We beg people who despise us to be accepted into their system. That's not a dignified response. It's disgraceful to our ancestors. We have to be able to stand up and say that we are going to be a people who are going to move forward, whether you like it or not. And that's not saying we are against any. I just told you, I spent all day yesterday organizing security for an indigenous march. There were very few African people there. So don't bring that narrow-mindedness to me. We are not talking about any kind of anti-white stuff. There was a woman yesterday at the march. There were many of the Black Bloc people, the anarchists there, the white anarchists. And I've worked with those people for years. They tell you on TV, well, they're Antifa, they're terrorists. Those people defend you and protect you better than the police will. And they respect me because they see the work I do. I saw them all. They're all black blocked up, faces covered. About 10 of them. I walked through them and they're like, Ajamu, we're so glad to see you. Thank you for being here. And I'm like, I don't know who the hell you are, but I appreciate you too. Because I know that a lot of you that are talking, when it's time to throw down, you're nowhere to be found. But I've been saved many times by those white people. So I know better than think, the problem is white people. No, the problem is a systemic problem. It's much bigger than that. Okay, but getting back to this, the question of dignity, as previously stated, Malcolm was a radical revolutionary thinker before leaving the Nation of Islam, And the evidence is that in 1961, Elijah Muhammad sent Malcolm X and Jeremiah Shabazz, who was the Nation of Islam minister in Philadelphia, to Georgia to meet with the Ku Klux Klan. This is a fact. You can study it. It's out there. Several, numerous sources have documented it and confirmed it. Jeremiah Shabazz has been interviewed about it on YouTube. He's passed away, but he's on YouTube talking about it. It's very documented. I'm not throwing shade at Elijah Muhammad. If you don't want to deal with truth, that's your problem. It happened. So Malcolm didn't want to do it. He didn't want to meet with the Ku Klux Klan. As any sensible African wouldn't want to meet with a bunch of white terrorists. I don't know why y'all keep negotiating with these terrorists. I don't want to meet with the Ku Klux Klan. I don't want to meet with the Proud Boys. I don't want to meet with none of these terrorists. I don't want to meet with the people in the Democratic Party, the Republicans. They're all terrorists to me. I don't negotiate with terrorists. I don't understand why some of y'all do. But he didn't want to meet with the Ku Klux Klan. And so he went to the meeting because the Nation of Islam is a hierarchical organization. You follow orders. So he went, and Jeremiah Shabazz reported back to Elijah Muhammad that Malcolm was the crackers in that meeting from the Klan were so disrespectful and racist that Malcolm got to the point where he just had enough of it. So he began to talk trash to them. When the white man said, maybe, because the whole thing the nation wanted to do, they had farmland in Georgia. If you study them, you know that. And they wanted to make sure the Klan was not sabotaging their proposed effort to grow food from that farmland. And so that's why they sent these two men down there to try to negotiate some sort of treaty with the Klan. But again, you can't negotiate with terrorists. You can't trust anything they say. It's just like they say you can't trust criminals. You can't trust white supremacists either. They're criminals. So during the meeting, the white man told Malcolm and Jeremiah Shabazz that we'll make an agreement, but if we have to lynch one of y'all, we might end up doing it. Ha ha ha! It was a big clown joke to them to say that to them. So Malcolm got mad because he had this dignity thing, and so he told them, well, if you try to do that, you'll find that we are not the we shall overcome types. And the white men got all upset, and it was almost a fight, and that almost happened. And Jeremiah Shabazz was trying to be the peacemaker, and he went back and he told Elijah Muhammad that if it didn't work out, it was because of Malcolm's behavior. But Malcolm knew exactly what he was doing. Haven't you ever been in a situation where you were in the situation because you probably didn't know whether it was a relationship or whatever, you didn't really know, didn't feel like you were strong enough or didn't understand how to get out of it, but you find yourself subconsciously doing things to sabotage it. And I would argue that this is what Malcolm was doing the last few years he was in the Nation of Islam. This is what he was doing. In 1962 in LA, the Los Angeles Police Department shot and killed a brother in the Nation of Islam named Ronald Stokes. And Malcolm flew out there to LA, flew out here to LA. And Malcolm's mindset is that we're going to organize the Fruit of Islam, which is the militia component in the Nation of Islam, and we're going to attack the police. That's what he wanted to do. He was committed to doing that. We're going to retaliate against the police. But Elijah Muhammad told him, Allah is where the justice comes. We don't do that. And Malcolm was very discouraged. And all you have to do is look at the videotape of his press conference he gave in LA. And he was very discouraged. And he didn't know what to do. And he did some things that were wrong. But they asked him, there was a plane flight that went down. It was 120 white people from Georgia were killed during that time that he was in LA. And the press asked him about it. And he said, well, that's 120, something to the effect. It's 120 people were closer to freedom, something to that effect. But I think that was just his frustration that he was expressing about not being able to do anything about the police viciously murdering an African man and no justice coming from it. But it was also a reflection of his disillusionment with the Nation of Islam. And I'm not saying this to defame the nation. I'm making the point that Malcolm already had revolutionary ideas. He had that since he was a child. He already had revolutionary Pan-Africanist ideals. He had that since he was a child. And so when he, in December of 1964, spoke after just a few weeks after John F. Kennedy was assassinated, and they asked him, and he said, it's a case of the chickens coming home to roost. He was already on suspension. The relationship was very strained with Elijah Muhammad when he did that, because there were forces in the nation that were working for the Federal Bureau of Investigation to sabotage the relationship between Malcolm and Elijah Muhammad. The FBI visited Malcolm at his house. This is on YouTube, y'all. I mean, I'm not making this stuff up. And they tried to get him to become an informant against Elijah Muhammad while he was suspended, and he refused to do it. But when he said what he said about Kennedy, the chickens coming home to roost, he knew exactly what he was doing. And what he said about the assassination was 100% correct. Even 60 years later, you can't refute the logic that he gave. 62 years. He said that Kennedy had engaged in sabotage against the democratically elected government in the Congo of Patrice Lumumba and the National Congolese Movement. And the Central Intelligence Agency assassinated Patrice Lumumba because the National Congolese Movement wanted to nationalize the resources. Belgium, I told you already, was such a brutal colonizer that when the Congo gained independence from Belgium in 1960, there were only 15 people in the country who had trained technical skills, college education, because we were prevented from getting that under Belgian colonialism. So it was very difficult for us to be able to have the capacity to do anything. And so the first thing that Lumumba did was try to nationalize the resources. Well, this was a problem to the capitalists because they were focused on getting Congolese uranium for atomic power. It was the Cold War, the US versus Soviet Union. They were building these nuclear weapons. You can't do that without uranium. The Congo to this day has the world's largest reserves of uranium. So they were trying to get this uranium. And here comes Lumumba, this 35-year-old African postal worker before that, telling them, no, we're going to control all of our own resources. Well, they had to get rid of him. They had to get rid of him. And so that was what they were intent on doing. And Kennedy was the president and was the one that okayed the effort to assassinate Patrice Lumumba. And so this is what Malcolm X was talking about on December 1st, 1964, when he said it's the chickens coming home to roost. When you facilitate violence all over the world for your own selfish, individualistic, capitalist purposes, then that violence will come back on you. That's what he was talking about when they asked him about John F. Kennedy's assassination. He was 100% correct, 100% correct. And it also demonstrates that he was moving in his own direction to become more and more revolutionary. And the other thing that has to be understood about Malcolm X is that he always understood the importance of organization. He was not an individual out here running his damn mouth behind some keyboard on the internet. He was an organizer. And he did so much to build up the organization within the Nation of Islam. They can't deny it, no matter how hard they do. I've studied the history. I know what Malcolm did in the nation. He was critical in helping them start their first newspaper, Muhammad Speaks, in 1957. He was critical in helping recruit and build up what they called temples and then mosques at the time to build up their membership. He'd go around speaking and they'd recruit people. He was one of the main inspirations for recruiting Minister Louis Farrakhan into the Nation of Islam. Even Minister Farrakhan admits that. That's not my opinion. That's what happened. He was a critical piece of recruiting Minister Farrakhan into the Nation of Islam. He was a critical piece in recruiting Muhammad Ali into the nation. And he didn't do it all by himself, but he had key roles in all of that. He always practiced organization. And when he left the Nation of Islam, he didn't do like a lot of people. He didn't go out here and just be like, well, I did that. I'm not doing that no more. You know, that don't do no good to organize. He didn't talk stupid like that. He started two organizations. I told you, the Organization of Afro-American Unity and the Muslim Mosque Incorporated. Malcolm stood for organization. So before we get to this closing, it's just important because some of you might be saying, well, you said the title was The Distortion of Malcolm X. Yeah, The Distortion. If you didn't know all this stuff I'm talking about right now, then your version of Malcolm X has been distorted. And you got to ask the question, well, why did I think what I thought? That's the distortion. That's what it is to take the real Malcolm X and make you think it's something else. Make you think that, well, he just hated white people. Or make you think, well, it was great. He read the dictionary from page 1 to the last page, and that's how he learned how to read. And yeah, that's all great stuff, but that's not the legacy of the man. The legacy of the man is dignity and understanding that the best gift we can give our people is to stand up and recognize that we, each and every one of us, has something to contribute to humanity, and we should defend our right to do that. We should defend our children. We should see our children as our greatest gift. We should be respectful to every African woman. That's a big part of dignity. We should be respectful to our LGBTQ family members. That's a part of dignity. We should rise up African men in a real sense, not no fake pseudo toxic masculine way, but in a way of understanding that true manhood is recognizing when you're wrong and being willing to admit it and to stand up and do what's right for yourself, for your family, for your community, and for humanity, regardless of the cost. Regardless of the cost. That's dignity, you all. And that's what this man represented. And in a political context, representing all of that, understanding that we are African people and our future is tied to the direction of Africa. And Africa's future is socialist in its future. It's not capitalist. Capitalism is the reason we're in the situation we're in today. And being brave enough to understand that, articulate it, and study it enough so that you can understand it, nobody can easily talk you off of it. These are all aspects of dignity, you all. And this is what this man represented. So how do we reclaim Malcolm? We have to commit to study his work. We don't study anything. We want the easy way out. We always want to be entertained. If it's not entertaining, we don't want to do it. We're intellectually lazy. That's not cool. We have to change that so that we can grow to see him as more than just some dynamic individual, but as a contributor to our people's liberation. That's what he was. And if we do the work to study Malcolm, and when we say do the work to study him, we're talking about studying him on a mass level, collectively. I mean, in the All African People's Revolutionary Party, we have work study. I've been a member in May, it'll be 41 years. And we study. I attended my first work study meeting. I read the first 70 pages of W.B. Du Bois's The World in Africa with 3 other people. That was in June of 1984. Fast forward to February 2025. I had work study last Sunday. And we read Angela Davis's book. We read the first 70 pages of her book, Women, Culture, and Politics. This is my life, you all. 41 years studying, and taking that to go out and do the work. So if you're going to challenge me on this stuff, you're welcome to do that, but you better know what you're talking about, because we have done this work. We ain't just sitting here talking about individualistic, subjective opinions. We have done this work. And so this is what we have to do. You can't just read a book by yourself. Join up with some, even if it's just your children, not just, but even if it's your children or your partner or your friends, do a book club, do something so that you're studying this material so we can get a greater understanding of it. Because you don't get the understanding, you won't understand what's needed. You'll think that the issue is DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's what we need. And you won't even understand that DEI was a response to our independent struggle for liberation to undermine it by integrating more of us into the capitalist system. That's what it was. That's why these programs came. These people met. Richard Nixon, McGeorge Bundy, David Rockefeller. They all met. And that's how affirmative action and all this stuff was created. Because we were burning these cities down, and they were afraid that this country was going to be burned to ashes. And so they said, we got to get a few more of these Negroes in positions where they can represent our interests, get education, and see themselves as representing us. And so they've done that. If you know that history, then you're not surprised by people like Nelly and Snoop Dogg and Kanye. Well, that doesn't surprise you. These people have a lot of money. So the whole strategy was to expand the African petty bourgeoisie so that all these Africans, the Tim Scotts and whatever the Negro's name, there was the doctor with Trump and all these people, to get these people to where they could speak for the ruling classes. Because we didn't have people speaking for the ruling classes before, but we do now. And that class was created. And these people intentionally created it. And we run around here today talking about Martin Luther King's birthday, talking about wealth building. That's disgraceful. So I have pictures of these books here. Malcolm X, the final speeches of Malcolm X, Malcolm X speaks, Malcolm X, the last speeches. All of these are books you should read. They're all speeches by Malcolm X. Read what he said. Don't just read Alex Haley's autobiography. Malcolm was dead by the time he finished the book. That's a lot of that is Alex Haley's opinion. And I don't trust Alex Haley. I know you do, but I don't. You should read Malcolm's words. So do that. Get in a book club, a group, and read these books, you all. Start by engaging in collective studies of Malcolm's words, not just Alex Haley's. Study Alex Haley's, but study what the man said and did himself. It shaped my life. So I can help you understand how to access that if you're serious about it. But we want to thank you for joining us. And we ask you to join us next week, March 2nd. March is it's Women's History Month. And we want to start it by recognizing 5 African women giants of history. So we ask you to join us. These are not women that you're going to learn about in schools here and in this backward society. So join us and learn more. And then the QR code in the upper left-hand corner, the red and white one, if you scan that, what you'll find is a number of AAPRP programs. This is just one of them. We have a number of these programs, online programs, so you can find out about all of them. The Pontula podcast, there's the Forward Ever podcast. There are a number of them, so check them out. Pan-African News Show, check them out. And then the Forward Ever shop, that link is in that QR code. It's where you can go. I don't know if you can see, but I have a hoodie on today. We sell all these hoodies that have positive revolutionary messages. You know, stop just talking about support Black business. A lot of them don't do anything for our people. But here we are, an organization that works for African people all over the planet Earth. So support this work. And you can do that by buying something from the Forward Ever shop. And then hoodcommunist.org is an international revolutionary Pan-African blog with outstanding contributions. I had an article posted there last week on Kendrick Lamar's performance. So go read them. Definitely read that. And then right under that, we're organizing African Liberation Day. We do it all over the world. We'll have about 20 commemorations all over the African world this year. We use donations. Those of us who are organizers in the AAPRP pay for all of the commemorations in the U.S., but we raise money to pay for the commemorations all throughout Africa. We have them all over the African continent. So we ask you to help us finance that. You can do that by going to GoFundMe.com. And if you do that, you want to type in Together for Africa's Future and Dignity. Together for Africa's Future and Dignity. And when that fundraiser comes up, donate what you can. $5, $10, $20, $100. It goes towards strengthening our work at home in Africa. So we really appreciate if you do that. It's very critical. And then join the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Go to aprp-intl.org, aprp-intl.org. You can watch a video. Even if you don't want to join, you should do that just to get the information. So when someone mentions it to you, what do you think about that? You not, well, I think, no, you don't know. You don't think anything because you don't know anything. But if you go there and you study it, you can know something. That's great. Bottom right, Burkina Books. It's one of our projects on the ground throughout Africa. We're in Burkina Faso. We're building literature for our people there. So go there and become a monthly sponsor. Same thing. Give what you can. Do it every month. And then my book in the upper right, unfortunately, you can only get it on Amazon. I'm sorry about that. But if you have a printing press and you can mail all over the world free, then let me know. I'll switch to you tomorrow. but a guide for organizing defense against white supremacist, patriarchal, and fascist violence. We use the master's tool to overthrow the master. A guide for organizing defense against white supremacist, patriarchal, and fascist violence is only $8. I use 100% of the proceeds to finance my anti-fascist work, which, like yesterday, what I did yesterday, that's exactly right. So help us stay strong, forward ever. Have a great rest of your evening.